Hello, all. This is Tammy Brunk, Earth Sky Woman, and I'm here with you today on August 3rd, 2025, with an August 2025 astrology oracle just for you. How are your hearts, dear friends? I know we began this month with a bit of a raw note, I will say, or a note of some vulnerability. I say that because on July 30th, we had Chiron stationing retrograde. And when an outer planet or a celestial body that is not an inner planet, that's not a fast moving planet, stations direct or retrograde, especially, we really feel it. It's almost like this ocean liner kind of steering, like stopping and turning direction. It's slow. It just takes a while to fully station retrograde or direct. And it also is at its closest to the Earth. And so when we have a planet stationing, we really feel this kind of pulse, the aliveness of that energy, that medicine of that planet. And so we really opened August with a chironic medicine. And I want to speak into that for a moment because it wasn't just the Chiron retrograde, it was also about a week before that Chiron was squaring the sun. And now in this coming month, we're going to have Venus in a conjunct, I'm sorry, a square to Chiron, and we're going to have the sun in a trine to Chiron. And so there is going to be more of that medicine. And so I just want to speak into it in a little bit of depth because I think that Chiron, from my perspective, Chiron is a celestial body that is one of my primary medicines because it is in the first house for me. It's within about 10 degrees of my ascendant. And it's been for me, as many of around my generation, my age, it has been my teacher over the last 7 years in particular, as I've approached and now completed my Chiron return. And now it's approaching for the final time, conjunction to my ascendant this December. So I've really been in about 7 years of pretty significant Chiron activations. And in that time, there's a course that I had developed it was a dream healing temple. And it was one of the courses of many that I've developed over the years where the intent was to bring together a group of collective dreamers where we dream together with the astrological with a particular planetary body and the universal energetics that are represented by that body. I actually also see it that we're dreaming with that literal intelligence that's embodied by the planet. So we were dreaming with Chiron, we were dreaming with the asteroid Hygeia, we were dreaming with Ophiuchus or the serpent bearer in the sky. Those were the three sacred energies that we were really tuned into. And I say that meaning that we were tuned into what was happening with them in the sky over that period of time we worked together, and also the way that those planetary energies showed up in the individual charts of each participant. So, like many, that's the way I love to teach. It's the way I really love to bring these mysteries alive. And that's really what the foundations of astrology are, the beauty, the gift of astrology beyond our desire sometimes to use it to predict or to control or to try to get what we want in a very direct way, which is kind of the underpinnings of some forms of mundane astrology. Beyond that, my sense is that astrology in its highest context is an opportunity for us to tune into the way that our inside world and the outside world are always in this sacred dance, and that the divine presence that lives within our own hearts and that mirrors that divine presence of source itself, and that is a part of that Godhead or that original divine source, that there is always a kind of an inhalation and an exhalation, a dance, a rhythm, a harmony between those energies. And when we practice astrology and we're really tuned in a reverential way, and a playful way, and perhaps an irreverent way sometimes, because we need to bust through old dogmas, then we begin to really live into the reality, from my perspective, that this realm, this earth realm, the universe, this life that we get to live is pure magic. Yes, there are plenty of experiences that we have that are heartbreakingly difficult. Yes, humanity ourselves as a species are experiencing um, a tremendous degree of contrast and of, we are seeing the playing out and the culmination of a dark age and the amplification of that so that we can fully heal and clear that. And so we can fully birth ourselves as a species anew so we can support in bringing about a new age, a new era, a new way of being. And in that way, we're doing that. We're not doing that just as a species. We're doing it co-creatively with Mother Earth herself, with the cosmos. So with that, my sense is Chiron, to place Chiron in the context, my sense is that Chiron, like a couple things about it. Chiron is a planet that is located between Saturn and Uranus. And so it's often called the Rainbow Bridge because it is a celestial body that actually helps us to heal, mend, or alchemize one of the most foundational challenges of what it means to be a human being in a human body as this massive spirit. And that is the sacred fracture point of being a human is what Chiron helps us to heal. And it literally is that kind of sense of, that it's like the Uranian part of us is the part that knows anything is possible. The Uranian part of us lives in a realm of miracles, lives in the quantum. And that space where, when you move into the quantum field or the void, anything truly is possible. So that's the realm of Uranus. And we are living into a very Uranian time. As we move further into the age of Aquarius, Uranus itself has just moved into Gemini, a very dynamic sign for that planetary body. And Pluto itself is in the sign of Aquarius again, which is very Uranian, that nature of that sign. At the end of this month, we also have we have a new moon in Virgo that is going to be square Uranus. So this is a very Uranian, very Aquarian period that we're living into. And so, again, on one end of it, we've got Uranus, which is all about that limitlessness, potential, possibility, evolution, expansion. And then we have Saturn, which is the planet that the ancients would refer to as it was the furthest out visible planet. So it defined the limits of the known universe. And so in many ways, Saturn represented that aspect of the outer limits of what we can actually accomplish or what we can do from the perspective of the material realm, the 3D realm. And, Saturn has gotten such a bad rap because we, over the last period of this dark age or of the age of patriarchy, have perceived of the material realm. And when I say material, it's like matter, mother, and in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, a friend recently taught me, and even to the early Essenes, the earliest Christians, they would have, in the simplest understanding, they would have understood spirit or God, the Godhead, or the sacred, the source of all things. They would have understood God as being expressed in two foundational ways. The first way was God in matter, or Mother Earth, or the material realm, or the material, particular, physical. That is the materialized spirit, right? Immanent spirit. So spirit within matter. That's the feminine aspect of God, the mother aspect of God. And then you have the spirit that moves through all things. So that formless spirit that moves through everything. And that would be the masculine or the father aspect of God. So that is one of the simplest ways to understand the duality of this universe that we exist within. And so with that, there has been, of course, an inversion during this dark age or during patriarchy where there's been an imbalance. Of course, within patriarchy, it has harmed those of male gender and of all genders, not just feminine. And it's not about the masculine or even patriarchy itself being a negative thing. It has to do with balance. But within this time frame, this time of inversion, we have had this, there has been a, how do I say it, emphasis on the positive qualities of the masculine or the spirit realm, and a negative connotation to the material or the mother realm, the physical realm. And as I see it, our imagination, our consciousness, our perspective as humans is profoundly impactful. And it is, we go through cycles as well, right? So part of what has caused this material realm, as we look around and see violence and war and the violation of human rights and all of the very distressing things that we see around us today, a great deal of what that has to do with is the final posturing or the final expression of distortion. And that is the story we've told about what it means to be physical, what it means to be in a body. There has been a belief system that it is that suffering is kind of the basis of life on Earth. And so that's what we've been playing out. There is a new paradigm that we are stepping into, and there are more and more of us who are moving into this new paradigm. And, Chiron to me feels like part of the medicine that supports us in alchemizing ourselves so that we are ready to move into this new paradigm. And what that is it includes all the layers of the material, all the way out through Saturn, that we really do integrate everything from the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all of these dimensions of the physical material realm in its magic and in its mystery. Of course, the Earth as the primary body, and our own bodies as an aspect of the Earth. But we encompass all those layers of the biosphere of Mother Earth. And then beyond that, then we extend outward into the Uranian and post-Uranian and trans-Neptunian even objects in the cosmos that are beginning to be folded back into the human story. So, but Chiron is the bridge that helps take us there. And the way that it does that is often through helping to break our hearts open. Chiron is often that energy that really softens the heart. And at its best and in its finest, Chiron helps us to soften enough in our lives and into a beautiful kind of presence that we allow, or we become a vessel that is softened and that is open and that is present enough to be inviting to those aspects of ourselves, of our soul, of our more tender parts that have felt exiled and who have not felt that it's safe to return. And I say all this from that view that many ancient societies had carried, and many sacred societies had carried, that we have a soul that is the part of us that carries the wisdom that we accumulate over this life and other lives, and that also in some sense has a kind of a tenderness to it, such that when we go through experiences that are very traumatic or very distasteful to that sacred soul self, that a part of the soul will leave. And that happens over the course of our life. It's part of what it means to be human. And so my sense is that Chiron is actually the great healer who, at certain stages in our lives where we go through a Chiron square, or Chiron's on our sun, or whenever Chiron is aspecting our chart, or when we go through a Chiron return, when we go through Chiron processes, the way that feels to me is that it is like this sacred being, Chiron, the great healer, is supporting us as modern humans in undergoing the kind of a process that we would have had ceremonially enacted in a sacred culture. In many of the original cultures and earth-based cultures that were healthy and wise, there would have been one of two kinds of experiences that an individual would have over the course of their lives to ensure that these little fragments of soul that are lost are brought back into the body, so that those aspects of our life force that are not in the body can be pulled back in. And one of those ways is if you have a gifted healer or shaman kind of figure who literally tracks and journeys to find those parts of the soul in the other world. And in some ways, and sometimes would physically like blow that aspect of the soul back down into the body through the top of the head or through other parts of the body, the heart, um, and through other various means of reconnecting that vital life force into the body. And or there are other instances or other ways in sacred cultures that you might have, as in I think I can't remember which African culture it is, that would literally have community create a container within which the individual would be held and would be reminded through the entire community of what all of their deep gifts and skills and abilities are, and how it is that they're so beautifully loved and held in the container of belonging of community. And that in and of itself would also be a kind of soul retrieval process. And that form of soul retrieval process within some African traditions, actually would come about when that individual had gotten out of balance and maybe they were behaving in a strange way or a violent way. And so that's how the community knew that there were aspects of the self that had left the body, or there were aspects of the self that weren't in balance. And that is how that kind of communal soul retrieval process, those are the words I'm using, would be conducted. But in both cases, there's an understanding that we need community, we need societal processes that will help an individual to come back home to themselves and come back into balance so that they can be harmonizing with life and feeling that they are belonging to life in a way that they may have forgotten. So my sense is that this is the realm of Chiron. And so if, we enter this month of August, part of what we were feeling was rawness, or a feeling of like, I know I felt like in my body, there's this repeated experience of, I'd actually had a week before that was really beautiful. I'd had a lot of wonderful experiences the last couple of weeks in August, or July rather, of just a lot of time outside, a lot of time in the water, appreciating the beauty of an area in Missouri and the Ozarks that is it's a scenic rivers area that has been set aside in the early 60s as a national park, where we have two rivers that have never been dammed. And that have, I think, what is it? I was reading this information that I've been, it's the Current River and the Jack's Fork River that I have known about my whole life. I've spent time on both rivers, and I'd spent time at the Jack's Fork also earlier this summer for a wedding celebration. But somehow, a lot of my work as a naturalist, as a park ranger, as a biologist, most of that actually was out west. And even when I was getting my master's degree in environmental writing, and I was studying with some of my favorite Western writers and learning more and more about the history of the West and what had happened to the lands out west and all the dams that had gone in and the devastation of indigenous cultures, all of that. I had learned so much of that in my adult life out west. And so coming back to Missouri, when I discovered this was the first national park that was set aside to protect these wild rivers. And then I learned that it was actually these Ozarkians, these this Missouri community that was comprised of, people of what we would refer to as every political persuasion, who came together and decided that they wanted to restore the well-being and the health of these rivers and not to dam them, unlike what had happened in all the other areas out west during the 50s and beyond, where most of the great rivers were dammed, and they were, their natural life force energy and the way that they flowed was altered. So I was spending time in these rivers, and I had been there in the context of reconnecting really sweetly with my 11-year-old godson and a beautiful niece, also 11 years old. We were fishing, we were canoeing together for the first time, and really enjoying these waters. And then I was also learning about the Klamath River in Oregon, and that after 10 years of legal battles, that the indigenous communities around those rivers, who held that river as sacred, had been successful in undamming that river. And so I was seeing videos of these indigenous youth on their kayaks celebrating the free-flowing river that had just been freed. Oh my gosh, I just have to say, I don't even know what kind of bird it is that just landed in these leaves just to my left. but it is a teeny tiny little, oh my gosh, the cutest little bird. Oh, holy cow. It might be like a little gnat catcher, whatever it is. It's just precious. Anyway, so I've been loving the nature. I've been loving the beauty and the waters of this of Missouri. It's unusual for me to stay in the state all summer long, but I have this time. Even though I do honestly miss the skies of the West and I miss that as well, but I have been being where I am and enjoying the wildness here that most people don't even know about. Um, so I'm still curious about this little bird. Anyway, so I had been really enjoying the last couple of weeks, and then I had come back after a lot of this kind of socializing back and forth with family and friends in St. Louis as well after the float trip. Came back to where I live here in a more rural area south of Columbia, Missouri, and I just felt like I had a hole in my heart or just this heavy feeling in my belly. It was just like this continued sense of, when I was by myself, it's like this kind of chronic foundational sense of loneliness or emptiness. And, I'm well aware that some of that is just, I do take breaks, but like many of you, I do look at what's happening from a 3D perspective in the news, what continues to happen in Palestine, what continues to happen with immigrants in this country. And of course, I feel it and it hurts my heart and it is deeply distressing. So I knew that was part of it. I knew part of it was also just the kind of letdown after a lot of movement. And I also just felt a raw edge of something that wanted to be softened. And so part of what I experienced in this Chironic healing was that at the Leo new moon, which is on the 24th, and it was just a few days before Chiron stationed. And so it was really also carrying the medicine of this Chiron activation. I just kind of spontaneously was able to process for the first time, really in my life, a flower essence, which I had never done before. And, it's like Bach flower remedies. It's kind of a homeopathic thing, but it's really working with the subtle essence of a flower. And I had thought about it. I kind of felt like I wanted to do it specifically with a flower that I have loved since I was a child. There weren't many of them when I was growing up. There was a little glade. Now, a glade in Missouri in the Ozarks is it's a kind of ecosystem that is a little bit almost like southwestern desert on some level, but also because it's a little more dry. And some glades even have these like collared lizards. Some glades have prickly pears. Some glades have um, also like even roadrunners in some parts of the Ozarks. So it's kind of like a melding of this more southwestern desert ecosystem with the kind of prairie. It's a little bit prairie, and then it's also a little bit eastern woodland. So and Ozark Mountain, indigenous Ozark Mountain um, topography, geology, ecosystem. And so it's a very interesting ecosystem that you won't find anywhere else. And actually, the place where I grew up is right up the road, the gravel road I grew up on, like within a mile of where I grew up, is a glades area that is an ecosystem that you will not find anywhere else. And my mom saw collared lizards when I was growing up and on the land that I grew up on. And so it's a very unique kind of ecosystem. But when I was growing up, we would go up to the pine tree up on this glade up above the creek where we grew up. And I remember, I'll never forget this moment where I saw this gorgeous pink flower. I mean, it was magic. It was pure magic. These really waxy, kind of otherworldly pink petals and a beautiful yellow center. And I just remember I started to smell it, and I literally, like, I never forgot the smell. It was like smelling heaven. Like it transported. They say that it transported me. And so I always was looking for that flower, and I don't recall seeing it very often at all in my childhood. Um, and so my mom had begun over the last number of years after my dad passed, she had begun to clear out the land up above our house in the barn by I think she had burned it at one point, and then she also was removing some of the juniper and some other plants in order to kind of restore a prairie and somewhat of a glade in that area. And so part of what we saw happening because of that change in habitat was we would see different kinds of plants growing, plants you might find in the prairie, and in the glades. And one in particular was this flower. It's the rose gentian, Gentia, rose gentian. And so I remember a few years ago, one summer, they were just popping up everywhere in this field. And it was amazing. I'd never seen so many before. So it was just like the earth expressing itself through flowers. And it was extraordinary. And so I kind of had this thought. I was like, I want to make a flower essence out of that. But it was just kind of in the back of my mind. And then it just ended up that the week after the float trip, on the 24th, the new moon, somehow I ended up at my mom's. I didn't plan it all out, but I did stop and get a bottle of brandy on the way down. I got her some flowers. I got a bottle of brandy. And there were so many things happening that day. I was making falafel for my family that I ended up giving to many family members and friends. And we had gone to the World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis that morning, so that we could see this beautiful Andean condor that was there. And I was bringing my mom, my sister, and my fairy godson, Jerome, was going to be there. My dear friend, Becky, and her two girls, including my goddaughter, Margot. They were coming in from St. Louis with my sister and Jerome from St. Louis. We were coming down from south of St. Louis, meeting at the World Bird Sanctuary. And so it was a very busy day, and I spent the night with my mom. But before we left for the World Bird Sanctuary, we had to leave at 7. I knew I needed to go out and be with the flowers, and let the flowers show me which flower wanted me to use it or have it be a part of this flower essence process. And so I had gone up and because I didn't have very much time, I'd gone out into the field and I was just kind of connecting with the different rose gentians. And then there was one off to the left, and of course, I wouldn't have chosen this rationally, but the plant was very clear because I had to go through some serious grasses and weeds. If you know Missouri in the summer, that means chiggers and potentially, usually later in the summer, but still seed ticks, which are not fun. So I'm like, okay, I get it. Like if you're telling me and I'm getting this insight, it's not something I would have rationally chosen. I felt the plan. It was just like, yeah, I'm the one. So very sweet. And so I just started to connect with it. I offered some water to the plant as an offering and was listening to what the message of this plant was, because this flower is not documented well. And I actually looked it up as a flower essence, didn't see anything about its properties, which was kind of fun, right? Because I like to listen for this myself. That's part of the point. So I was just listening in to what the medicine of the flower was. And as I was listening, the message that I got, it had to do with the softening of the heart. It had to do with the restoration to belonging to life. And it had to do with this resurrection of, interesting words, pristine innocence. Now, I would not use those words often. In a way, here I am in the Bible Belt, white cis woman in the US at this moment in history. I am well aware of the larger context, right? And words like purity, pristine, those words can be used in a way that is not honoring of the human full experience. I'll just say it like that. However, when I felt it with the flower. It feels absolutely accurate, because I do think that beyond any of the kind of dogmatic or misogynistic ways that words like purity or purification or innocence might be used, there is something about the pure frequency of innocence, of pristine, that is about kind of a stripping away, to my view. It's tuning into something that is very etheric, very spiritual. And that's exactly how I feel these flowers to be. It's kind of like they do bring us into a portal of absolute magic and medicine. And so I really loved all that the flower was sharing with me, and the belonging to life. That is something that I actually, and I don't talk about this much, but in the last 6 months, as I sometimes traverse the territory between the part of myself that is really steeped in love and magic and faith in the realm of miracles, because that's where I prefer to live. I won't apologize for that. That's absolutely a big part of who I am. I also traverse that, and then I'll traverse back into seeing and hearing and understanding what's happening in Gaza, or what's happening, in this nation that I was born in and that I am a part of in this lifetime, with immigration and with many, many things that are coming to the surface and amplifying so that we can see them and so that we can change them. I have had moments this year where I have not felt a belonging to life. I have felt myself want to pull away from life, and really kind of puzzled or bewildered by what authentically is a um what is that fertile territory of staying just connected to what is in 3D that humanity is experiencing, staying connected enough so that I'm not completely dissociated from it, and yet not allowing myself to get so sucked into the narrative and the kind of toxic tribal mind that I forget that that's the old world that is dying. And so my aim is to be in contact with what is true, what is whole, what is filled with love, what is love sourced. And I want to give my focus and attention to that. That's where I want my attention to be. And so there have been times, though, where I felt pretty muddled and pretty pulled into the darker current, right? Like most of us do. So it felt very powerful. And the softening of the heart, again, felt very chironic. And that's what what I was saying is, it wanted to just say, our month began with Chiron, and it continues to have some strong energy around Chiron. And so, yeah, I just wanted to honor that. Now, even with that kind of a bit of an undercurrent there, we also have the undercurrent of the new moon in Leo, July 24th, that takes us through until the new moon in Virgo on, I believe, the 22nd of August. So we are in this Leo field. And even beyond that, Venus moves into Leo after that. So it kind of extends that period. And so when in the Leo field, and when I was capturing this, then I captured the flower essence, and I brought out my mom's crystal bowl later that afternoon while it was a new moon, put fresh water in it, brought these beautiful pink flowers, 9 of them. I was using a Mayan kind of sacred number of 9, because part of my training is in Mayan spiritual healing and sacred bathing rites. So I was weaving that. And then it just so happened, of course, that it was with the new moon, which I didn't know that morning. And then I didn't know as I was getting the brandy the day before and coming to my mom's. And then it was like suddenly like, hello, it's the new moon. In any case, so we're in that window of Leo medicine that is at its finest. Leo really reminds us that each of us are royalty. We are all royalty. And it uplifts, in a moment where so often what I see and feel in the news and in the energies that are coming at us all the time, it is an absolute degradation. The images we see coming out of Gaza, it's the degradation of the sacred human. When I say sacred human, I believe that our origins, that our true nature, just like all the rest of this creation, are sacred. That in our nature, we are an aspect of God. There's nothing that's foundationally wrong with us. And I believe that we've been told there's something wrong with us. And that's how we've been behaving. We've been separate. We've been in an experiment where we're separate from the creation, but we're really not. And so Leo, I'll share a story that feels right about what healthy Leo, what it does for us, how it heals us. Um, when we are in the presence of someone who's carrying healthy Leo, or when we ourselves are shining the light of Leo wisdom and beauty and gnosis, we are remembering the light that lives inside of us. We are remembering our true nature. That is my belief. So the story that I love about that, and I've told it before, but I don't think I can tell it too many times, is the story about Hiawatha and the Peacemaker from the stories of the Iroquois or the Haudenosaunee people of the northwestern US and Canada. And I mention this because this month, like last month, actually is another month where here in the US, we are given the invitation again to uplift and to amplify and to breathe into the true original spiritual blueprint of what this country's what the highest expression of this nation's potential really could be. I say that because I'll talk about it later, but Sirius is a very important star, the blue star Kachina to the Hopi. Sirius was the significant star of the new year to the Egyptians. It is the reason why we celebrate the Lion's Gate. It's the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. That this star has a lot to do with the original spiritual blueprint of the U.S. because the birth date of the U.S., the sun was aligned with Sirius. So this month, Venus and Jupiter come together, aligned to Sirius. Now, this does not happen often. I do not know the last time that happened. But Venus and Jupiter together in the sky is massively beautiful, potent, joyful, expansive energies aligned with Sirius. That is a massive blessing that we are stepping into in the month of August, and among many, many other things, because there are many other nations who have alignments with Sirius, many cultures, including the Dogon tribe of Africa, who have origin stories of coming from Sirius. There are a million things I could say about Sirius, okay? But it's just tapping back in. That's why I'm telling this story of Hiawatha and the Peacemaker, because the highest potential of the U.S. as a nation, I feel, is always roots us back into the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, and their great law of peace, and their stories of how they lived through a very dark time when they were very violent, very warlike, and because of the presence of the Peacemaker and his ally in human form, Hiawatha, and the work as well of Jigansasi, the Mother of Nations, the three of them, as a kind of trinity, that they came together and they helped to bring about a balancing and a healing and a birthing of a new order from that very violent, dark time. So their stories are hopeful stories for us. And the reason why they are so important is because the founding of the U.S., one of the brighter aspects of the founding of the U.S. was the profound influence of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, of their ways of governing themselves, of how egalitarian and how highly evolved their ways of operating, and how peaceful they were among themselves, that deeply inspired Benjamin Franklin and other founders of the U.S. And so I tell the story of Hiawatha and the Peacemaker with the intent of seeding in this powerful month the potentials of what can happen also in this nation and across the globe as we seek to bring peace in a time of great violence and darkness and war. So what happened in the story is that, and I should share that there are many versions of the story. You can listen to Oren Lyons. He is a wonderful indigenous leader and a storyteller. You can listen to his stories. You can read in Braiding Sweetgrass. Robin Wall Kimmerer tells a wonderful story about the Peacemaker and Hiawatha and the entire story of the coming together of those nations. And the story that I'm going to reference today, it comes from Robert Moss, who is one of my key teachers, in his story about Iroquois dreaming. And in his version of the story, he shares how the Iroquois were living through a very, very dark time. And in his version of the story that he had derived from various historical accounts and his own dreaming, it was such a dark time, in fact, that they had resorted to cannibalism. If you want to talk about the deepest depravity in terms of these ages, and many ages and larger ages of time where individual human cultures or human society as a whole goes into these dark periods, there's a kind of a cannibalism that'll often show up that kind of shows, okay, something is corrupted, something's distorted here. I say that, yeah. And, I say that understanding that from a spiritual viewpoint, there are aspects of our modern current culture that can be seen as cannibalistic as well. And I know that's a very harsh word, but I do think if we look at what's happening in various regions across the globe with trafficking, with what happens to children on many levels, with what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in other areas, that absolutely, it feels like humans are literally we're harming each other at that level. So these stories tell of a time kind of like our own, where humanity has been cast into darkness. And at that time, the story, Hiawatha has just killed his neighbor, and he's literally sitting in front of this pot of soup that's made with his neighbor's body. I know this is like, these stories are very dramatic, right? They get our attention. So he's literally eating his neighbor. Does that feel like anything that's happening today? I know to me it does feel that way. And I'm not saying that that's all that's happening in our world, but there is a dimension of that we're having to look at that's very real. And so he's eating this, and then all of a sudden, the peacemaker stands behind him. And what happens is the peacemaker is this divine sacred being, much like a Christ figure, who is standing behind him. And I'm getting chills even saying this. Because when he stands behind him, he is a being of light. He is a being of pure unconditional love. And so what Hiawatha sees in this kind of grisly pot in front of him is the reflection of the peacemaker that all of a sudden is emerging as if it's coming from the water that's in front of him. And so he sees this image of this divine being, and he actually remembers. He thinks it's himself. He thinks he's seeing himself because, of course, he is. He's remembering his own divine nature. And so in that moment, he remembers who he is. And simultaneous to that, he looks down and he actually sees what he's doing. Like he's been amnesiac. He has not been conscious for various reasons we won't go into. He had been so traumatized, as are many of those individuals today who are enacting some of the most horrific crimes against humanity. Many of those individuals, whether they be certain ICE agents in positions where they're having to do some very horrible things, and whether they are Israeli soldiers who are being enacting certain horrific practices, that he in this moment, or any of us, myself, like living in a country that is sending arms and sent another round of arms to Israel, not to mention what we do in our own country. So in that moment, what happened, as soon as he remembered who he really was, he saw the light of who he really was, which is what's happening to many of us right now. There is a massive awakening that is happening right now. We're remembering who we are. We're remembering our oracle abilities. We are remembering that we are telepathic. We are actually literally being steeped in what Nancy Rebecca, who is an intuitive, who has been seeing these blue light beings and who has been shown and told that we are going through a portal since 2017 of receiving massive inflows of this blue light that is literally a light of truth. And it's also helping us to operate more from a unity consciousness perspective, which is our original nature. Because of all of these things, and I will mention the blue lights also are understood to be oriented to Sirius and connected to the civilizations of the star Sirius. In any case, so there is this kind of unity consciousness that is present with that. And so what happens for many of us is that when we start to recognize when all of those layers of separation are starting to dissolve, it does create a softening of our hearts. It's also like the Chiron activation. And with that softening of the heart, we think that's going to feel good. And as we awaken spiritually to more unity consciousness, we think that's all going to feel good. And yes, some of it does feel very good. And we want it to, right? But there also can be a simultaneous thing that happens, like what happened to Hiawatha, which was that in that same moment that he remembered his true original nature, he literally saw what he was eating, and he literally saw what he was doing was violent, absolutely violent and corrupted. And it was in such a mismatch from who he actually knew himself to be that he was absolutely horrified. And so we can imagine what happened in all that moment, that moment of recognition. This is who I am. I am a divine being. And look what I'm doing. Oh my goddess. Oh my God. This is horrifying. That's where many people are right now. So if you're feeling that right now, if you're just waking up to what's happening in Palestine, if you're just waking up to lots of injustices here in the US and across the globe that you're, connected to because you are born at this time. If you're learning histories that you hadn't learned before, for example, which many people are, then it's like there's this beautiful awakening to all your latent potentials and to connection to everything and feeling more connected to nature and all these things. And at the same time, it's like, holy cow, what are we as a humanity actually doing? And this is so not okay, right? So I share this story because to me, it feels like Leo, one aspect of Leo that most wouldn't talk about is that it acts like that light of the peacemaker. It's when you're in the presence of another person, or you are in the presence of light, of great light, of a spiritual awakening, for example. It can be very disorienting. And it's the intent of it is to actually help you wake up that light inside of yourself. And that's what Leo does. Leo helps us remember our own divine nature. And that is a beautiful, sacred thing. But also that light, and we're having all this light streaming into our bodies, it flushes what's been in darkness up into our bodies so it can be detoxed, so it can be healed, so it can be released. And so that's not always a comfortable process. And that's happening with us in our societies right now as well, and our political systems and all of our institutions. So much light is flooding in that it is kind of bringing to the surface what has been distorted. And it's also bringing an awakening within us, this greater and greater ferocity of this desire to say enough, no more. And that is also Leo. That is also that Leonine lion energy. If you're coming from the Christian tradition or the Rastafarian tradition, it's the Lion of Judea. That's the Christ lion. That's that ferocity of unconditional love that says, no, not in my name, not anymore. No longer will I allow this abomination to occur. And we have that power. There are a lot of energies in this world that would just say that we just stand by and we just, this is how it's always been. This is how it will always be. I don't subscribe to that personally. I do not, absolutely do not subscribe to that. And I also think that the way change happens is very different than what we actually perceive. And I do think that that change does begin internally with our consciousness. And that when we are awakening within ourselves to our own divine light, then if we stay with that process, it is going to emerge from us as actions, as states of being that do disrupt the current paradigm and that do cause ripples all around us and that do cause us to take action in ways that serve love. And that's not all about comfort. There's a lot of that can feel very strange at first. And, the light itself, like some would say that when angelic presences or divine beings are attempting to get through to us, sometimes that can be experienced as extreme discomfort. Like we confuse it and we think that we're under spiritual attack when the actual truth is we're just not accustomed to that much light or that much power that is wanting to be in a connection with us. So I feel like right now, this month, and really moving forward in general, there is a massive need for us to step into the field of this reality. I would call it a reality that everything is for us, meaning that this entire universe, this entire cosmos is actually rooted and sourced in love, and that everything that we experience in our lives is supporting us in moving more into a place of greater coherence and harmony and wholeness. And when we move from that place, when we operate from that place, we bring more beauty, when we operate from that place, we begin to cultivate our subtle senses to ask in every moment, what's alive right now in my life and in everything that's unfolding around me that is just like life, wanting to pour more love into me, wanting to help me to open into a life of even greater beauty and possibility and wonder. So I say all of this because my sense is that there are a lot of energies and a lot of old patterns that have had so much power and so much sway that say exactly the opposite. So my desire is to feed that understanding that we can look for what's well, what's good, what is unfolding that is beautiful. And, even as we do that, of course, there are plenty of energies that are alive right now that, and plenty of instances where when that light comes on, we also see and feel this great grief and this sorrow for what is out of balance and what the cost of that is in our own lives. Sometimes it has to do with, a lot of us are going through these kinds of awakenings where we'll wake up in the middle of the night and, oh my gosh, like we're more conscious of the places where we had opportunities the day before that we could have loved more, or we could have shown up more fully. We could have been more present, and we don't. And so it's, and sometimes that's for ourselves, and that's kind of can be a growth edge, because also sometimes we can deplete ourselves because we want so much to love that maybe we're out of balance in terms of boundaries, or we're out of balance in terms of understanding that some of that needs to be directed towards ourselves. Like the Christian principle of love thy neighbor as thyself. You have to love yourself first. I absolutely believe that. So Leo helps us with that. When I talk about Leo, I want to, in shamanic astrology, we often say that Leo in its essence is about radiant, radical self-love. And when I think about Leo, I often think about a woman, Amy Scher, Scher, who wrote the book, How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. And she, like many other healers I love who actually literally healed herself of an illness, it's a phenomenal book, number one, that I recommend it just anybody. It's a book that I think everyone should have. But what I love about the book is that after working with thousands of clients to help them heal themselves as well, the conclusion that she came to was that about 9 times out of 10, like almost all the time, when a person has a disease or an illness, from her perspective, that the origins of that disease or that illness came about through that person dimming their light, like dimming the light of their spirit in one way, shape, or form. And I think that's a really important concept when we think about this Leo season that we're in the midst of this month, and even some beyond, because Venus is going to be in Leo through September. So from my perspective, it's like this understanding that, we are here to embody spirit within these physical bodies. We are here to marry heaven and earth within ourselves. We are here to have that Christ light, or that, however you want to say it, that divine light wake up and animate within this incarnational being that is us. And so, this month is an invitation to be who you are, to be fully who you are, and to be authentic and to shine that light. And it doesn't mean needing to be performative or dramatic. It just means, follow the track of what lights you up. Honor and dignify who you are just in your nature. Know that you're loved not for what you do, but just because you exist. I say these things, we've heard them all before, but there is something profound about full self honoring and dignifying, and to really practice that, and really, even in a way, just say, what if I really did value and love myself, similar to the way that I might value or love a beloved child, for example, or a dearest friend. If I were to love myself equal to that other person or child or whatever, how would I feel about that thing that I just said to myself? Or how would I feel about the way that I'm spending my time today, the choices I'm making? If I fully loved myself and saw myself as divine, what would those choices be? So to play with that, that's a beautiful thing to do this month. So we are in that field of Leo, and we also, as I'd mentioned before, I'll just mention a little more because I think I've invoked it through the story. But this month is, you could say, potentially features the most powerful astrological aspect of the year visibly, which is Venus and Jupiter coming together in the morning sky. So I would highly recommend a lot of what's going on astrologically. If you look at the list that I've posted of astrological events, you'll notice the new moon, Mercury stationing direct, Venus and Jupiter conjunct. They're all happening in the early hours of the morning. And with Venus and Jupiter, they're, even as I'm speaking now, whenever you see this video, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is going to last for about a week on either side of that conjunction, because Venus moves about a degree a day. So it's not like all of a sudden they're together and then she's gone. It's a bit of a slower buildup and then releasing of that energy. But it's the morning of the 12th when Venus and Jupiter are exactly conjunct with each other in the sky, and that they are in such a position that they are activating Sirius. Now, Sirius as a star already will have begun to be visible for many of us. So in the morning sky, so that before you go out around sunrise, for many of us, we will begin to see that beautiful, bright, sparkling blue-white, brightest star in the sky, Sirius, before sunrise. But then you're going to also see Venus and Jupiter aligned very close to that. So there are many levels of magic in this. And one is that Jupiter is already in a sign that is very happy in, which is Cancer. And then you've got Venus and Jupiter, which there's a lot of so some would say Venus and Jupiter were conjunct at that was the star of Bethlehem that drew the Magi, or the astrologers, who came to Christ's birth. If you believe that historically or not, even doesn't matter, but so there's a kind of a Christic energy connected to Venus and Jupiter coming together anyway, and they're aligned with Sirius. And so there's just a lot of star magic that we feel at that time. Not only that, but then we have the Pleiades the Perseid meteor showers are happening around August 11th. Now we do have a full moon on the 9th, this full moon in Aquarius, that I was always taught is the vision quest moon, because Aquarius really is an energy where it helps us open to our higher visions. So that's a really beautiful thing. But so we have a full moon, and so you might not see the Perseid meteor showers as vividly as you would if it was closer to a new moon. But still, if you go spend the night out under the stars, Sunday night, Monday night, if you camp out under a good sky, you're going to see some beautiful, you're going to see Venus and Jupiter if the skies are clear, and you're probably going to see some meteors. And so, this is just a beautiful time. And you're going to see Sirius in the morning sky, most likely. So there's so much star medicine, so much star magic that is really lighting up for us. And not only that, but we also have this new moon in Virgo that is going to be, I believe, the 22nd of August. It's listed there. And it's going to be with Regulus. So that's really beautiful as well. Now, we won't see it, okay? Because when it's a new moon, that means that the sun and the moon are together, they're aligned. And in this case, it's like a solar gate. That's one way to describe it, which is also very beautiful, where you have sun, moon, and Regulus all lined up in a row, kind of like an eclipse, right? So Earth, Moon, Sun, Regulus. And they are in a perfect line, because unlike Sirius is not on the ecliptic. Like, Sirius is not along the path that the sun and the planets travel, but it is activated by the moon and the sun and the stars when they're near it. But Regulus, on the other hand, is one of the 4 royal Persian stars that is along the ecliptic. So literally the sun and the moon will be really close to it. So you won't see it, but you can feel it. And it opens this gate into the mysteries of the star Regulus. And, certain stars just have a tremendous amount of magic and medicine to them. And so with Regulus, Regulus is a star that is one of the 4 royal stars of Persia. It's connected to the archangel Raphael, who is an angel of healing, and Regulus is the heart of the lion. So again, we have all this energy that is Leo energy, that is Lion energy, that is waking us up to our own fierce power in a way. And so this is also just another dimension of that. And what else? So also that is a very powerful new moon because it's going to be square Uranus. So very dynamic, a very powerful time to connect into because it is Virgo, so it's in our own priestess nature. It's also connecting into our own innate royalty, much like the sign of Leo, because it's the heart of the lion. It can be a healing star, so it can be a healing experience. And because it's square Uranus, there's also the potential for a lot of spiritual awakening. And I say a lot of there's the potential for unusual, surprising, kind of miraculous events that can shake us out of our comfort zone so that we're really more available for spirit to connect to us. So it is, I don't know if you can tell from everything I've shared, but this is an absolutely extraordinary month. My counsel would be simply to um, allow this month to be a time that you really open your heart, soften your heart to feel what wants to be felt, and to play with the idea that the universe that really is wanting to support us as a species and you individually to heal, to grow, to evolve, to help to co-create a world of greater beauty that's really sourced in unconditional love. And so I encourage you to live in that way. So this is going to be a beautiful month, and I'm sending you so much love. And please do share in the comments any insights that anything that you're experiencing right now in terms of your journey, what you're learning, how you're growing. Please give feedback into any aspects of this that have been very supportive for you. And also click subscribe if you haven't, please share. And I'm just so thrilled to be able to have this opportunity to be present with you. And I'm sending so much love.